Everybody, this is Anthony Brogdon. I'm so excited. I got two people on the show today. Oh, we're going to double your pleasure on Strong Inspirations where we give it to you straight, no chaser. I don't play with you people because I am serious about this. I want you to know history, to appreciate it. And then I find these people is two lovely ladies on the channel today, and they're going to blow your mind. They're coming out of that Maryland area. And, ooh, they part of this museum that is one of the most effective in America. Oh, you're going to like this perspective, everybody. I'm telling you. So come on, my friends. Hit the subscribe button on Strong Inspirations. I do this for free. I don't ask no money, nothing. You can watch the videos for free, and there are over 500 of them. We're from all over the world. Did you see the one I did at the museum in near their town, Sandy Springs? It's called, I think, Sandy Springs Museum, but whatever, look for it. Did you see the one I did with the museum? And there's quite a few of them. Oh shucks, I can't even think of the names of so much of this good information. But did you see the one I did with the guy whose great-great-grandfather was one of the largest enslavers in Mississippi, and he wrote the Jim Crow laws? And this gentleman is running the country saying, hey, I kind of apologize for what he did. He said, I didn't do it, but my heart wants me to let you know how I feel on behalf of myself and my family. Watch that video. And there's so many more. The one I did with the guy who goes into the pyramids in Africa, and he wrote a book on it. He shows you what's there. He tells you what to experience. Watch that video. And as you maybe do know, don't know, what have you, that as I record this, we're coming up on Juneteenth in America, everybody. Significant holiday. I've been doing a lot of public speaking on this accord. And I am super excited that I've been invited to the island of Galveston. I will be there to speak on Juneteenth. I'm going to blow them away. Y'all know what come on, man. They're going to like what I got to say because I keep it real from a positive perspective. So for all that, go to my website, businessintheblack.net. Many of you may know I'm a filmmaker. I've done this documentary titled Black Business Book because I was not told some of the things that I cover in this movie about the successes of African Americans dating back to slavery. Did not know those stories. I did them in a documentary, and then I turned around, and I wrote a book about it. And I have been told by many folk it's America's #1 Black business history book. And I only charge $10. I don't want them in my basement. I want you to have this. So along with the show, the movie, and the broadcast, I'm giving it to you some form of fashion. And I got a movie coming out real soon, everybody. Now, you hear me use this term strong a lot. Strong is my favorite word. I wish my middle name was Strong. And in my world, strong stands for strength, tenacity, resilience, and a sense of oneness, nobility, and grace. And that is my introduction to my guest today. Come on, ladies. Oh, this is going to be good. Watch out, folks. Introduce yourself. We're going to get it on.
Okay, thank you. I don't think I can top that, but thank you so much for having us on. I agree that what we're doing is very much in line with what you're talking about, but we'll get to that. My name is Allison Weiss, and I'm the director of Sandy Spring Museum. Sandy Spring Museum is a small town located about 12 miles north of the border of DC. Was settled permanently mostly by Quakers in the early 1700s, but of course, the land was originally inhabited by indigenous tribes, including the Piscataway, the Mattawoman, and much of the town's history was built on the backs of enslaved people. So we'll be talking about that this morning.
Oh, Really? Okay. So as we go into it, and I got another guest, and she's gonna come on a little bit later, and we're gonna have her introduce herself. But as we talk about, I gotta ask a couple questions about you for the guests to get to know you. Where were you born and raised?
I was born and raised not far outside of Philly, like in the Philly suburbs.
Okay. Um, what happened to you for you to want to have this kind of job, and
Oh,
and and
that's such a good
and and,
question.
and so on and so forth?
That's such a good question. So, I was in the Peace Corps in Sierra Leone, West Africa. And when I got back, I knew that I was really interested in learning about other people's cultures. So I went to graduate school for cultural anthropology. But my real experience, like why I got into this field in particular, was I was in graduate school. I lived in the Federated States of Micronesia doing research, and I was writing a paper about Micronesian traditions and what people believed and how people's culture had changed through colonization. And I wrote it totally from the perspective of white people, and I did not involve the perspective of Micronesians. And one of my teachers, who is Winona LaDuke, who's an American Indian activist, she read the paper and she said, "Why didn't you let anybody speak for themselves?" And it's like, it never even occurred to me that people should speak for themselves. And from that point on, I really devoted my career towards creating opportunities where people could speak for themselves and not have other people interpret their histories.
Oh, okay. I gotta ask. You stay on this just a tad. The Peace Corps. I hear so much about it. What is that? What does that mean? How do you do it? How do you sign up? Just
Sure.
for a
Well,
tad.
this was a long time ago, so I don't know how much it's changed since then. But Peace Corps is a volunteer service where at that time it was a 2-year commitment, and you have some kind of skill that you can share with people living in, quote unquote, developing countries. In my case, I taught sewing, which was a really great skill for kids to learn in Sierra Leone, because being a tailor was one of the few occupations that you could make a living at. So I lived in a small village in Sierra Leone, West Africa for 2 years, and it's really a life-changing experience, being embedded in somebody else's culture like that.
Okay. I gotta stay on this just a tad. We got something here. We're gonna get to the topic. You were you the only white person in that village?
Oh gosh, yeah, yeah, definitely. Yeah.
Really?
Yep.
Was that scary?
No, Sierra Leoneans, like if you can generalize about an entire country, they're like the friendliest people I've ever met in my life. Nobody was shy. I don't think I ever spent a minute by myself. Everybody just wanted to be friends and get to know you and introduce you to their culture.
And so, okay, how did people, when you were going, did people in your family and otherwise tell you, hey, be careful, watch out, why you doing this? What was that reaction?
They said every single one of those things, but we were very safe there. I mean, there unfortunately there, the civil war that was going on in Sierra Leone started the year that I was finishing my service there. And we did get evacuated from our sites, and that was a very exciting escapade. But personally, I mean, the country was very safe before the Civil War. I don't feel like anybody was out to hurt us. There was a lot of petty theft, but that was because the difference in income between me as a Peace Corps volunteer and your average Sierra Leonean was just astronomical. So I really can't blame people for wanting to steal what they saw as like, we just had way too much, and they had almost nothing.
Did that create and I'm sure the answer is yes, a sense of compassion in you that you didn't know? Was that a ha-ha moment for you that brought out all of who you are today, so to speak?
Definitely. I mean, I had no idea that poor people were not responsible for being poor. Sierra Leone was a poor country because of the history of colonialism. It's actually a really rich country in terms of natural resources, gold and diamonds. But it was poor because of the history of colonialism. And I never knew that until I saw it myself, what the results were.
So then you go to school and say this is going to be my plight in life,
Mm-hmm.
and then you get back to area close to home. As you said, you're not far now, and you become a part of the museum association.
Mm-hmm.
To do what? What do you want to do personally?
Yeah, so I just think it's really boring and tedious when museums are very top down. When museums feel like we have all the knowledge and we're going to just share what we want to share with you. We're going to share the stories only that we want to share, and we'll tell you who the winners are and who the important people are. I just think it's way more interesting to hear what other people have to say. You know, like you don't have to be famous to have a story that's worth saving in a museum. You can be an everyday person that has a really interesting story. Like I'm sure you have interesting stories.
Sure.
You know, why aren't they in a museum? Well, that's because somebody made a decision and said, oh no, we're only going to put rich, famous people's stories inside of museums. So we're trying to change that narrative at Sandy Spring Museum. We have the stories that we have, but if you look more closely into the stories, they're not all about the rich and famous people, because rich and famous people had to deal with everyday people all the time. And those stories are in our archives also. And so we're trying to make those stories way more available. And you have to involve the people whose ancestors were part of those stories. So that they're telling those stories again. So it's not us deciding what the important things are, what we want to share. It's the people who have some personal connection to it that should get to make those choices.
So now, where is the museum located? Is it downtown? What kind of building? So on and so forth. And then we're gonna go into
Yeah,
what else.
so we're located on about 7 acres of land. The little town called Sandy Spring. There's only about 2,000 people living in Sandy Spring, but we're part of the DC metro area, so it's outside of Sandy Spring is a really congested suburban area. The museum was built, it was established in 1980, but it was built, this particular building was built in 1997. So it's a really beautiful building that has lovely architecture and, you know, like I said, on 7 acres of land. So the property is really beautiful. And when you walk in the building, everybody always says how welcoming it feels. There's something about the architecture and the staff and our mission that just makes people feel welcome.
If I may ask, to toot your horn, since you've been there, what have you done to make it great? That you changed or you brought to the table, that kind of thing.
Sure, sure. So a big part of the way we operate is that we call everything we do community driven. So rather than us come up with the ideas and hope that people show up to our programs, we go out to the community and say, what do you want to do here? And the community has fantastic ideas for programs. So, you know, if you had a great idea for a program, we would help you make that possible at the museum. And then you would know who your audience is, you would know like the story you want to tell, you would know how to promote it. So we sort of collaborate with the community to help them bring their vision to life. So that's a really exciting part of what we do. Um, we also work with a lot of underserved and underrepresented communities. We're the Folklife Center of the Regional Folklife Center of Montgomery County. There's only 8 Folklife centers in the state of Maryland. So that's a state designation that we have. And we're in charge of the most diverse state, the most diverse county in the state, and one of the most diverse counties in the country. So almost everybody we work with as the Regional Folklife Center is a person of color or an immigrant. And the thing that people told us the most that they needed, you know, in addition to support for the programs, is they just needed space. Like they can't afford to have space here. They can't afford to rent it. They can't afford to have their own building. So we're actually just breaking ground now on a new space that's going to be free for folk artists to use. So they can use it anytime they want to. They can use it for whatever purpose they want to, for meetings, for performances, for rehearsal, and it's going to be totally free. And I'm so excited that we're doing this project because I think it's going to be really meaningful to underserved communities.
Since you've been in this capacity, what have you learned about the community, that kind of thing? The ha moment that said, "Ooh, this is good. We got to do." You know what I mean?
Yeah, I think that even when you're intending to do good, sometimes it is misinterpreted and sometimes it's still seen as very patronizing. So we're just so careful to try to involve everybody as partners and still not feeling like, oh, we're doing this because you don't have money or we're doing this as charity. That's not how people want to feel. And it's not because people are poor that they need this space. It's because they're underserved. So we're trying to make it's a very equal partnership. We asked people what they wanted. We asked people how they wanted to use the space, and we're going to let people decide with us how the space should be used.
Well, I know that Lydia is going to talk in particular about the African American exhibits. Can you talk about some of the other exhibits that are in the museum?
Sure. So we're not very exhibit focused. We're really program focused. One of our favorite programs is it's called Viernes de Plena. It's a monthly Puerto Rican drumming jam that has come to us by our partners from an organization called Cultura Planera. And every month they bring their drums and they teach people how to write plena compositions and play the plena drum. And this program doesn't just attract Puerto Ricans. I mean, it attracts people of all sorts of different backgrounds, because everybody has a drumming culture, and then they make it very accessible. So people have been writing plena compositions, not only in Spanish, they've been writing them in English. Somebody wrote one in Turkish. Somebody wrote one with ChatGPT. We have a 10-year-old who wrote a plena composition and performed it for everybody. We always have deaf people who come to this program, and they bring sign language interpreters. So it's an amazingly diverse audience that was only possible because our partners had this idea. I never would have had an idea for that kind of program. I'm not an expert in Puerto Rican drumming, but they had this great idea. And all of a sudden, all these different people are being brought together to enjoy it.
Now you had mentioned earlier about the background of the Sandy Springs community, and I think you mentioned the Indian population. Okay, what is
Yeah,
that? Can you give us a little bit more insight into that?
I mean,
What
what I can
happened
tell
there?
you is that there were definitely settlements in the area, because archaeology has shown that there had been people living in this area as far back as 10,000 years. I don't think anything else has been carbon dated. Those are from Clovis points. Clovis points are very distinguishable from other types of arrowheads, and those are considered to be about 10,000 years old. So those things have been found, grinding stones have been found, but there's no written records about the indigenous history of the area. And all of the indigenous people were forced from the area when European settlers or Euro-American settlers came to the area. So it's really something that is very much underdocumented.
So what was the tribe again that you mentioned?
So we don't know for sure all the different tribes that were here. We know that Piscataway were here, and the Mattawoman and the Chaptico tribes were living here.
And then the history was the Europeans came in and they went to war, maybe in battles or something like that. It kind of pushed them away or something.
There's no records that says there were wars going on. I think people were forced from the area. Not without a formal war. There's other ways to get people out, probably without declaring war on them.
Is there something sacred about the grounds of the museum, of the building, the acres that you sit on that you all have heard?
We don't know about indigenous culture, but we do know that the museum was built on a former plantation.
Oh, is that right?
Yeah.
And so the building was a plantation building.
No, this was built in 1997,
Yeah,
so
right. That's what you did say. Yeah, yeah.
it's on a field, and nobody did the archaeology, so we don't know what the building was constructed on top of.
I interviewed someone who talked about out of the Virginia, DC area, the Maroon community. Are there swamps? Is there any connection that you know of in that regard?
Not that I've ever heard of here. No.
Lastly, I made a couple more. What would you like? What what's your best day there?
My best.
When you've done some, what is the day that you said, "Wow, like, okay, now I know I'm on my right path, whatever,
Oh,
whatever."
yeah, that's so you ask such good questions. So there's a Korean group that we work with. It's called the Korean Peace Mission Drumming Corps. And they perform all over the place. They've performed at the Kennedy Center, and the leader of the group is just a Sung Park is her name, and she's very, very busy and very high in demand. And she did an exhibit here. She helped coordinate an exhibit of her sister's textiles. Her sister is from Korea. They flew in all the textiles. They did these beautiful program brochures. They had tons of programs about Korean culture. And I was talking to her about this after the exhibit was over, and it was a great success. And I said, why did you do this? Like you're obviously so busy. How did you have the time to do this? And she said she gets told what to do all the time. She says when they get hired at the Kennedy Center, they're told what to do. Whenever they perform, they're told what to do. And she said, you asked me what I wanted to do.
Oh, that was beautiful.
Yeah.
Now, how do people support the museum? I mean, do you have a big gala or something like that? That kind of thing? Because I mean,
We do
somebody, you got
somebody's got to
staff,
pay
what
for
have
this.
you. Right.
Yeah, we have a lot of grants. Probably about half of our income is from grants. About a quarter of it is from rentals. We rent the property for weddings and bar mitzvahs and birthdays and things like that. We also sell a lot of art because we have a lot of artists exhibiting here, and we also have donors. Yeah.
Oh, okay. What's the website?
SandySpringMuseum.org.
Oh, excellent, excellent. One more. You're proud of yourself. Your life. I mean, from where you come from, you've been around the world. You chose this path for yourself somewhere along the line, and you've made the most out of each moment. There's a
Oh, thank
question
you.
there.
I always say that the higher you fly, the harder you fall. So I do not take credit for all the great things that happened to me. There's been a lot of people who have supported me and, in an equal way, we're all working towards the same thing.
I guess one more question. What's your next step for the museum? I mean, I ain't gotta say personally, but yeah, for the museum, what's the next
Yeah,
step?
I feel like as many folk artists and people we're serving right now, I think there's so many people we haven't touched, and I really want to get out of the museum and start meeting people. We can't wait for people to come here and introduce themselves. We need to go out of the building. We need to start attending people's festivals and houses of worship, and we need to be seen so that people realize that we're serious.
That's more time of yours though.
Oh, that's the best part is meeting everybody.
Um, and do these keep coming up? Do people attend your events well? Do you wish there were more people that come? I know we always say that. We wish the place was packed and we couldn't take anymore. Is that something that is a concern? That how do I get the word out for more people to attend and appreciate what we're doing here?
Yeah, always. I guess you have your regular audience. You're hoping that more people hear about it. I think once people come to our programs, they're just kind of blown away and they want to see more. They just
Yeah,
got to get their foot in the door.
I got you. Well, thank you so very much. We'll come
Sure.
back at you. And so Lydia, sorry, Miss Frazier, come on. And
Hello.
everybody, I told you this was a twofer, and we are twofering it today.
Okay, hi there. I am Lydia Fraser. I am the archivist and collections manager here at Sandy Spring Museum. And I have been in the museum field for about close to 30 years. And my interest has always been about how we organize and access our knowledge and our information. So
Okay,
there you go.
thank you. So I got to ask a couple questions of you, as you saw. Where were you born and raised?
So I was born in Hamilton, Ontario, and raised in Southern Ontario, Canada.
Is that right?
Uh-huh.
A long way from home.
A little bit.
I'm in Detroit, a native of Detroit, but I did live in Atlanta for a while. Do you miss home? I mean, how do you
Yeah.
deal without being without the people, especially in another country?
Yeah. So, the states in Canada are very similar, but there are, parts of Canadian culture that are uniquely theirs, and that's there's a lot of, you know,
Yeah,
kindness and attachment to nature and things like that that are typically Canadian, and I do miss those parts. Yeah.
yeah, sure. So when you were a kid, were you a different kind of kid to say, I'm gonna do something different with my life? I'm not gonna live here in Canada. I'm gonna move away, or like when you played by yourself somehow, how do you get to have that kind of persona?
Yeah, so you know what? I owe it all to my educators. So I grew up in a very small farming community, and I had amazing teachers that just sort of expanded my mind, and I was just curious about the world. So as soon as I could, I went and put on a backpack and started going around the world,
Oh,
and
did
and
you
went to
really?
university. Yeah, sure.
Yeah. What does everybody think about you back home then? You the superstar that left, or we wish you were still here farming with us.
Well, you know what? It's my mother makes sure that everyone knows everything that I'm doing.
I can't imagine. Yeah.
Mm.
And so, what? How did you decide on this career path?
So it's really interesting. So it was purely from my father. So my father, he didn't finish high school. He worked on the railroad, and it was always sort of a little bit conscious of the fact that he was undereducated, and that he loved museums and he loved history, particularly living history sites, and he would take me all the time, and it seemed so accessible, and just that idea that like Allison was talking about, there's the history of the rich and the famous, but my dad just sort of zeroed in on the history of people like you, like me, and with everyday stories, and that was that everyday history that really intrigued me.
What is history? What does history mean to you? What is history?
Oh wow,
Yeah,
you do ask good
yeah.
questions. uh History, really, history stories, history, you know uh So did I do well in history class? Not really when I was younger. I did not
Okay.
like, memorizing the things people told me to memorize. I love to understand and imagine myself. What did it look like? What did it smell like? What did it feel like? How did people look at each other, talk to each other? Just that everyday experience, like time traveling.
Yeah.
So to me, that's history. It's yeah.
Because in some of my presentations, I say and when they have that slavery component, I say it's us today back then, and that is all it is. It was just us back then, and dealing with those conditions. Is that what you look at? Well, who are they back then? And yeah, that's part of it.
That's exactly right. And that's what the project that we're working on here at the museum is really, in a unique way, uncovering all of that history of the ancestors of descendants that actually live in Sandy Spring today. On any given day, they were at a certain store, they were working in a certain person's field, they were, purchasing this, that, or the other thing. So it is the everyday experience of these ancestors of the descendants here in Sandy Spring that we're trying to capture and make accessible.
I'm taking liberties here. For you to be good at your job, you have to know how to research.
Mm-hmm.
Is that correct? I mean, different than what I would know. I mean, people ask me, well, how do I research? And I just put in Google, but there's much more to that. And explain a little bit more of how you research.
So it's less about research and knowing, having access to certain kinds of material.
Right.
So, like primary source documents, you often hear that term. So that's things that were created, at the time, in the moment, and have first person recollections or record. And so, how do you research? I think about how do you get the information out to people so that it's accessible to them, so that they can interpret it, and just making as many sources available to people as possible.
So
So yeah.
when you do this, do you put it in a journal so you combine all of these documents, pictures of them, what have you, so that you do have one source? What's your methodology for doing that research? May I ask?
Yeah, so what we've done is we've taken, we've identified in our collections, in our different types of materials, particularly ledgers. We've identified people of color that had lived in Sandy Spring back in the early 1800s through to about 1920, and so what we've done is we've taken those documents, and we've pulled out that information, from the documents, and created these sort of little micro documents that relate to specific people of color here in Sandy Spring. The methodology for that is, first of all, we needed to know who the people of color were, because that's not always evident in the documents themselves. And so for that, we've used census data. as well as there's an invaluable document that we have from that was compiled in 1932 that was part of the Maryland colonization project. They did an inventory of all free Black residents in the state of Maryland and recorded their ages and names and all of that. And that's a really, really invaluable document too, to identify the folks that we want to center their stories on. So.
I'm gonna stay on this research part. So what do you do? I know a lot of it is computerized, but do you go down to City Hall? Do you go to the records department? Old newspapers? Do you go someplace outside of the museum and outside of your computer to do some of this research?
So yeah, so you can. So the Maryland State Archives holds a lot of terrific resources. Believe it or not, though, the census data is a fabulous resource, and that's digitized, as well as a lot of the materials now that one used to have to go and drive the car down to Annapolis and sit in a reading room and go through. That's all. A lot of it is actually digitized now too. So a shocking amount can be done just from our computers here as well. So yeah.
You mentioned the exhibit that you're working on. What is it, and what's the work? What have you found?
Mm-hmm. So it's not an exhibit. It's more of a, I guess, as Allison said, a program. It's a archival, digital archives program or project. And so back about 2018, 2019, we were given a large donation to digitize our archives. And our archives, as Allison mentioned, the museum was begun in the early 80s, and the archives were always sort of reflective of the dominant culture in Sandy Springs. So that was
Okay, let me stop you there. I mean, no, what is archives? What does that mean?
That's great. So archives is historic documents. So
okay.
yeah, so that can be letters, correspondence,
Okay.
deeds, ledgers, that kind of thing.
And
the majority of our archives date to the 1800s. So anyway, yeah, so we have always, because we would say, okay, I have this ledger, and this ledger records the farming activity that occurred on Joshua Pierce's farm, Joshua Pierce being a white Quaker. We have always said that this is a white document. This relates to the white Quaker experience. So and so when we digitized the collection and had done an inventory previously, we still were going on this assumption we don't have Black history in our collection. This is we need to build that history, but we don't have it. But once we started digitizing it, so digitizing means you scan a page and then a page, one after the other after the other. And
that's
then
a tedious process, right?
it is a very tedious process, but if you're careful and if you're, have attention to detail as you're going through, suddenly we realized that in these ledgers, we have so much Black history that relates to Sandy Spring. We just failed to recognize it. We failed to interpret it. We failed to, just see it. We didn't see it, but it's there, and it's always been there since the inception of the museum. It's just we just labeled it white Quaker history. And so the big question Allison and I had is, okay, so we have this, how do we make it accessible in a manner that is as easily accessible and available to the descendants of the folks whose stories are recorded in them, as it is for the farmer who did the recording, their descendants in that. So does that make sense?
What is when you give us some what is the history of slavery in Sandy Springs?
Mm-hmm. So yeah, so it's a little more complicated than the history books or the historical narrative tends to let on. So everyone is familiar with the Quaker narrative of manumission.
Okay, no, we're not. So let's no.
Okay.
See, because I ask questions so that the people who are watching this and myself, we have no clue. So give us an idea of that history.
Yeah. So, so the Quakers are pacifists, and they, so they were also slaveholders or enslavers, and they back in the early 1700s, and that when they were moving here from Great Britain, anyway, so
I don't
Sandy
mean to
Spring.
disrupt you. I got another question. The Quakers are a religion. What are the Quakers?
Mm-hmm. Allison, do you want to?
Yeah.
Sure. Yeah. So it's a religion that started in England. It's
Okay.
all over the world. There's not a lot of people who are Quakers, but it's an old religion.
It's an old religion.
Yes.
They come to America with this religion, but they have an attitude that they like slavery or they don't like slavery.
So it's complicated because
Right.
as a religion, the religion was opposed to enslaving people.
Okay.
As individuals, some individuals said, but I'm still going to enslave people.
Oh, okay. And so a lot of them lived in this Sandy Springs area.
Mhm.
Okay, do you go back as to why that area? One of them got there first, and then all the families started coming, that kind of thing.
Oh, sure. Yeah. Lydia, do you want to talk about the Snowden family? I mean, they were the first. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So there's a James Snowden who had the patent for this. So he was given this area, and he was Quaker. He was one of the first Quakers in the area. So he actually never lived in Sandy Spring. His two daughters married Quakers. One was a Brooke, last name Brooke, and then the other one was Thomas. Richard Thomas. And it's actually the land that the museum is on today was part of Richard Thomas's plantation. So it was those two that first settled in the area. And interestingly enough, so Richard Thomas, he enslaved folks his entire life. He manumitted or set free his and the people that he enslaved in his will in 1806. But just across the street, still standing today, is the house that he built for his overseer, that oversaw all the enslaved
Ooh,
workers.
so he had to be a vicious guy.
Yeah.
Yeah, he had to. I mean, we can't pull the punches. He's the overseer. The guy tells him, "My man tried to run. We got to go get him." And that house is still standing.
So that house is still. Oh yes, the overseer. But interestingly enough, so we have descendants of Richard Thomas, but we also have a large population of Black Thomases who have the last name Thomas that are descended from those originally enslaved by Richard. They all live here together in Sandy Spring.
Okay, so what was he, a farmer?
Mm-hmm. Yes,
okay, he was a farmer.
Yeah.
What did he grow? Do y'all know?
Tobacco.
Oh, tobacco. So tobacco is the crop of that era.
Yeah, so tobacco was the crop of this area. So these originally started out as tobacco plantations. So we're in the Piedmont here, and so it's a very thin soil. So tobacco depleted a lot of the soils around us, but it went very, very quickly, depleted it very, very quickly in this area. Yeah.
Is tobacco still grown there in that area in some
No,
regard, anything like that?
So right around when, so going back to the Quaker story, so the Quakers around in the late 1700s, there was a decree from the Philadelphia Yearly Meeting, which was sort of the big wigs of the Quaker community. So they said that they decreed that Quakers should no longer enslave people.
Okay.
And so these manumissions had started happening here in the Sandy Spring area, but But coincidentally as well, this is happening around the time that tobacco has depleted the soil completely, and the farmers here are turning to cash crops that are that are far less labor intensive. So they also aren't needing the same degree of labor that they would have on their tobacco plantations as well. So
Okay.
that's, so it's a story that's a little more textured and complicated than simply Quakers
Okay.
and
Let me ask you
yeah.
this: we getting somewhere because I'm learning a lot along the way. When he sets them free, what does he say? Okay, on July 1st, you're free and you can leave. You can go where you want to go. Do you have any record of what that meant and how it happened?
So yeah, so that's also another interesting piece to the Quaker story of manumission is that typically you know uh, the manumission document will state that so and so, say it was a mother and she was 24, so she would be free, but her children, if they had not either met the age of 21 or 18, depending on they were male or female, they remained enslaved until they became of age to have their freedom. And believe it or not, sometimes over the age of, I think it was 40, that you'd be too old um, to manumit. So the state said that these people couldn't be free because they were too old. But so going back to the Thomases, so when Richard Thomas, when he manumitted his enslaved, so even if someone is waiting to reach their age of majority so they can be free, the girls, so if they should have a child during that time, and remembering this, they're going to be teenagers at this point, but if they have a child and that child does not carry that manumission, so they are born into slavery, even though the mother has been promised when she reaches a certain age that she will be free. So as it happens in the Thomas family, that did happen as a young girl was waiting to reach the age of her freedom. She had a child, and that child was, once she was free, that child, upon the death of Richard Thomas, was actually given to his son and raised in the household of his son as an enslaved individual.
Yeah. Okay. We're getting somewhere. So what else is happening around in Sandy Springs? I mean, this guy is the big guy around. How many? What's the population of other Quakers? What is it? Is it? It's a farming town. What else is going on there?
Yeah, so it's predominantly a farming town, and remains so here. Just down the road in Olney, there's another town called Olney. At the time that it was called Mechanicsville, and so different industries start cropping up, as it with a lot of other towns in the area, in the East Coast of the United States during this time. But yeah, so there was. There was a big movement among the white farmers here in Sandy Spring to nourish the soil. So you also see something like the bone mills and different kinds of industry around fertilizing and revitalizing the soil emerge here too. So
A couple more. Is there any stories of lynching or any violence towards enslaved or Black people in general?
in Sandy Spring, so not like in the big sense that we're talking, but that's why what we're doing here is so important, because the something like a lynching is a very public and enormously impactful event that reaches multiple, a whole community. But within the documents that we are making available to people, there's just sort of daily things that are happening that are, that compromise dignity, that are, oppressing folks. Like, for example, we have a farmer, a ledger for someone named Joshua Pierce, who is was a Quaker farmer here in the Sandy Spring area. We have in his farm ledger, his business ledger, record of a mother leaving her 8-year-old son for 10 years and essentially indenturing him to Joshua Pierce, this Quaker, for a period of 10 years. He was 8 years old when she left him with Joshua Pierce. 8 years old. He was a baby. He was a little boy. And he's suddenly living in this house, this white farmer's house. His name was Levi Hopkins. Levi lives in Sandy Spring his entire life. So we have record from him being 8 years old, being left with Joshua Pierce for a period of 10 years, all the way to 1909, when he passes. So a little boy in this house, and we know for a fact that he was illiterate when he died, because literacy was recorded in census data and whatnot.
Is that
So
right?
yep. So and so we have this small child living in a household of other children. They were white. We know that Joshua Pierce had children the same age as him who were educated, and this little boy remained illiterate his entire life. They didn't even teach him to read. So those are the kinds of injustices and that are recorded, and I think are really important, that to contribute to the narrative and to have honest dialogue about what life was like in Sandy Spring. We often talk about this being a very large free Black community, compared the largest in the state of Maryland, among the largest in the state of Maryland. And we talk about the Black history and we talk about the white history, but there are these intersections that are recorded in these ledgers that show that it wasn't so binary, that the white farmers were relying on free Black labor to profit, to make their profits, to build their wealth, and the ledgers show clearly that despite, they talk about being paid wages, but the wages were equivalencies. So it will say Levi, we'll talk about Levi Hopkins again. If Levi was a farm laborer, a farmer was paying him, so say something like $85 a year. In the ledger, it says $85 a year. On the right side of the ledger, where it shows where he's being paid, on the left side of the ledger, the level of detail of this wage was equivalent to 2 barrels of corn, 1 month of rent, just that somebody's making equivalencies. Levi's not getting cash. Levi's getting stuff. And
Oh, really? Oh, I see
yeah.
his point. Okay.
Yeah,
Okay. Okay.
and somebody, the white farmer, is deciding what that stuff is worth, and
I got
he's
you.
recording it. And we know Levi can't read, right? So
I got
he's
you.
having to look at, this record keeping is accessible only to the farmer and not to
I got you.
not to the free Black labor, because
Yeah.
he can't interpret it, and he's, these equivalencies, a dollar worth of wages, or 1 hour of my time is worth 3 dried herring. Somebody's
Oh,
making that.
I see. So
Yeah, yeah.
well, no, we almost coming to a close. But when you say you see it in a ledger, is that a book that's an original book? I mean, it's a book, but it's what does it look like? Is it hard? Is it leather cover? Is the pages worn? What does that
Yeah,
book look like?
yeah. Well,
You
I
don't
don't know
have
if you.
one there, do you?
No. Well, so I can share my screen if.
Yeah, yeah. I mean,
Yeah, I
yeah.
got one. So here we go. So here, this is Joshua Pierce's ledger. We were the people I was referring to were real people. This is Joshua Pierce's ledger, and this is This is what a typical page looks like.
Oh
And
my God.
yeah. So what we did was, so when we first, when we first digitized this and made it available, this is all from the perspective of Joshua Pierce, a white Quaker farmer. So it relates to, you know, his cost and standard of living, home economics, all of that stuff. So this is really, this book belonged to Joshua Pierce. This whole thing is about Joshua Pierce.
Okay, let me
However,
stop you there. When you said you digitized it, somebody gave you this book to take somewhere for you to make the copies and then give it back to them.
no, so this was actually donated to our
Oh, I
museum.
see.
Yeah. So we have several of these kinds of
I
ledgers.
see. I got you. I love it. I love
Yeah.
it.
And
Okay.
so, and this is recording from his farm activity from 1819 to 1848.
I got it.
So,
Oh my God.
and I had told you about Levi Hopkins. And so this is how we've extracted the pages that relate to Levi and his mom Lucy.
I
And we
got
yeah, and so we created a single because it appears on 2 pages of this ledger. So we pulled those out and created an item, its own document that's related to Lucy and Levi, her son. We've had it transcribed here, which is another part of the project that we're doing. But the way we describe it is from Levi and Lucy's perspective.
I got you.
So
Man,
yeah. And so
phenomenal.
record of
Phenomenal.
indenture between Lucy and Joshua Pierce, Lucy's 6-year-old son Levi. Yeah. And so if someone, a descendant of Lucy or Levi, wants to find the information, they don't have to go page by page through a book and think, oh, I wonder if,
I see.
yeah. And so also by applying this same kind of, this is metadata, like information about other information. So if I click on the Hopkins family, and Hopkins Black family. And I'm just going to stop there for a second because I
Yeah.
want to make sure that we recognize that we've worked with the descendants of these folks in coming up with the words that we use to describe them, how we access the material and whatnot. So when we asked them how to distinguish between the white Hopkins and the black Hopkins, this is how they said that they would like it to be done. So if I click on the Hopkins family, okay, so we have at this point, and this is growing every day, we have 5 records that relate to the Hopkins family. These are not individual items. These are items we created by pulling them out of documents. And then in terms of also working with, and Edward was actually Levi's brother, and in working with the descendants as well, we're coming up with statements to make sure that we provide the correct context for these records. And so this is from a doctor's ledger, and and it's interesting because he not only records, why somebody came to see them, but also how much they were charged, how they paid, and also things like where they lived, which is really interesting information to have. But we have to acknowledge the fact that the doctor, though he treated a lot of Black patients, that when he was describing Black bodies, he often would use terminology and methodologies that were that compromised sort of dignity and privacy. And so we're working with the descendants to make sure that we provide access to this information in a way that is that preserves dignity and privacy and meets with the approval of the descendants. So
Oh, this is phenomenal. We really got somewhere. Thank you for that. Why did they write this stuff down? Was it for tax
business.
purposes or
No, it's
just?
just, yeah. So if you look in here, so this is, I'm back at Joshua Pierce's. So um, he, let's see here, I'll just pull up the next one. So let's see here. So John Macaulay was a blacksmith. It was very probable that he was white in 1822. So this was just this is his business ledger. So he's keeping, so when you see DR, that means debtor. So he and then on the other side it's credit, and so it's just a way of keeping his accounts, or an account book, keeping them all straight. So yeah.
Phenomenal. Yeah, let me see. Did you know Black history in Canada? Is
Sadly,
this amazing to you? Because I mean, there
it's
was enslavement in Canada, but it ended in 1833. So when you see this, you say, "Man, I didn't know this." What does this do for you personally?
oh gosh, so it's very emotional for me, really, especially when you get into the when you get into the actual meat of what was happening. And so what I have seen emerge, so here I'll try to find a different uh so when you start getting into like the really sort of the weeds of what people are where the goods are going and things like that, this sense of community among the Black community, in the Black community, is unbelievable to me. Like it's just you'll often see say here Joshua Pierce is paying one of his Black laborers. He records giving, whether it's goods or whether it's cash or anything, to multiple members of the Black community, and the person that is working for him is working to pay off the debts of others in his community. And it just there's so much humanity in it, and so
I'm not following you on that thought. Say that again. What is that? What are you
there,
saying?
there's so much humanity in it, in the sense that when you're talking to me about how do you research and what do you research, it's like it's these documents that are telling me about the relationships. So there's so Joshua Pierce, say Levi Hopkins is working for Joshua Pierce, and Levi's in Levi's record, he's saying, can you please give Samuel Budd 2 barrels of corn, and that gets recorded. We don't know what the relationship is aside from they're both being in the free Black community, and so I guess what I'm saying is that in Canada, when I was young, we learned about slavery in the States, and sadly very little about it in Canada. We were
Yeah.
that narrative was sort of tamped down, but it was just so theoretical. Whereas this, like these documents, what he's recording here is not only the Black experience of the free Black laborers, but we also know that the farms around Joshua Pierce had enslaved workers. Like this was a complicated area, but there was such a network of relationships. It's just, I feel like I really get
Okay,
a
I
sense
got
of the
you. I
people.
got you.
Yeah.
Let me. Well, as we almost come to a close, I keep saying because this is so good. I keep these questions keep coming up. What you both of you said that there was a large community of free Blacks. What, they were free and enslaved at the same time? Is that the case?
So because of the Quaker manumission doctrine that happened in the late 1700s, most of the Quakers here in Sandy Spring had manumitted their enslaved by around 1815, 1816. But as we said, because they had to reach a certain age.
I
So
got you.
yeah. So about around 1830 is when most of the those who were originally enslaved by Quakers gained their
got you.
freedom.
I
And
got
so,
you.
and many stayed in the area. And so, and then as a result, as it became a place where a community. It was definitely a community. It became a community where other free Blacks from outside the area came to move as well.
I got you. I got you.
So
Okay,
yeah.
how about this? On the high note, what did the free Blacks do? Did they develop businesses? Do you have records of maybe some successful businessman, businesswoman in the area, anything like that?
Absolutely. Oh my gosh. So these this community was, and that's what I was saying, is that you can see the interactions among all of the community. But so in 1822, Allison, 23, one of the Quakers donated land so that the free Blacks could have a house of worship. And so so we have actually just half a mile down the road, Sharp Street Church, which is the oldest oldest Black church in all of Montgomery County. And then and also as a result, uh, they were some of the free Blacks in the area were owning land. They had businesses. There was shingle makers. There were blacksmiths. A lot of very, very skilled people that were able to set up businesses. Allison, do you have
And
something to
and
add to
and
that?
that now,
Yeah.
yeah, go ahead if she does. And is there a university? What was the educational system for
Hmm. So there's anecdotal. The Quakers talk about having educated some of the Black community prior to was it 1872, when the Public School Act was passed here, to offer education to both the Black and white population. But you know, the degree the degree to which the Black community was being educated here in Sandy Spring is really, really vague, beyond anecdote.
Okay.
So
Um, as we come to a close, and I asked this of both of you all, is there a question that I have not asked you?
here, I'll stop sharing my screen.
Yeah.
I,
Is there a question I have not asked you?
I
Like closing remarks, whatever you might want to say, anything like that.
Oh, how about Lydia? Can you explain how you find this information?
Yeah.
You could ask us how would somebody locate these documents?
Yeah, right. At your place. Yes.
Mhm.
Good point.
Yeah, so if so we partner with a consortium called Digital Maryland, and you can find a link to our digital archives on our website.
Okay.
And yep, and the page that it lands on, if you look down at the bottom, it describes the equity and metadata project that we've just been talking about. And if you're only interested in seeing those items, then there's a little thing that says click here, and all those documents will come up. And it's growing every day.
Okay.
We're still
I
actively adding to it.
I gotta ask this question. I mean nothing with this. Have you cried after looking at something here?
Have I cried?
Yeah.
Oh my good Lord, yes.
Really?
Yeah, I did. I always go back to Levi. I look at this, and I can't imagine his mom, Lucy. I can't imagine, he must have been so terrified. Oh my
At the
gosh.
age of 8.
Yeah.
Yeah. Are there any historical markers in Sandy Spring, Finney? No.
Hmm.
Is there anything in front of the museum or a historical marker, the plantations, anything?
No, we're planning on developing those again with input from the local Black community so that we're saying it in the words of the Black community, what it meant to know that this land was a plantation rather than in our words.
Yeah.
I do know that the Slave Museum down the road has a phenomenal collection of signage related to Black history.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah, outside
Okay.
their facility.
as we close again, tell us how people can find the museum. What's the website? What are your hours? Does it cost? I mean, because you don't have exhibits, but uh, is there a building that people come to every day to see anything on the walls, or just when you have activities?
Sure. So what the project that Lydia's been talking to is all virtual, so anybody can access that with internet access anytime
I
they
got
want
you.
to. To visit the museum, you can see our website at www.sandyspringmuseum.org. We're open Monday, Wednesdays, Fridays, and Sundays. But we also have lots of programs. People mostly come for the program, so which
Yeah.
are after
Okay.
hours.
That leaves one more question. If I come on a Wednesday, one of those days, what do I see when I come?
Sure. So we always have exhibits up by folk artists. So if you came in
I
right
got
now, you would see an exhibit of people, how people use paper to make art in different cultures.
I got you. I got you. Well, hey, I thank you so very much for coming on Strong Inspirations. I really, really learned a lot. I'm sure the viewers will from around the world who watch this. Everybody, the description, the website, and things of that sort will be in the description. I thank you, both of you. Everybody, this is what I do with Strong Inspirations, man. I just try to come up with some intelligent questions and let them do the talking and let it flow where it flows. I don't try to think that I know the answer to even the smallest of instance so that you all can get it really good and understand this. And go down to that museum and support them. Go to the website uh, and so on and so forth. And I say to both of you, and I mean this for from the bottom of my heart, I want you to both to stay strong, stay safe, stay on your grind. I love what y'all doing. I love how both of you all have become through your own personal travels, your own personal way. Somehow you've been led to this and you do it very effectively. I'm sure a lot of the museums have similar type interests, but what you all said is that we've involved the community to make sure we get it right, down to the words that we use. And no one can fault you for that. You gotta be. Have y'all won an award or something like that? Let me toot the horn. Yeah, y'all got awards on the wall. Anything like that? The
We're
museum
we're we're
associations
gonna
and things.
take your endorsement for our award.
There you go. Yeah, if we can put that on a plaque, everybody from Strong Inspirations. I thank you so very much for coming on the
Thank
show.
you.
Have
Thank
a
you.
great day. Thank you.
You too.